Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today as we hold our monthly World Affairs Council of Kentucky and Southern Indiana local lunch and learn. This month, we are pleased to present Dr. Renee Campbell speaking on identity, belonging, and the international response to racism. This month, we are also presenting our program in conjunction with the World Affairs Council of Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky's International Education Summit. They've hosted an entire week of webinars, meetings, and trainings, and you can learn more at their website, which is globalcincinnati.org. My name is Samantha Risen. I'm the Global Education's Program Coordinator at the World Affairs Council of Kentucky and Southern Indiana. If you're not familiar with WAC, we are a hub for international exchange, dialogue, and learning located in Louisville, Kentucky. As a member of two national networks, Global Ties US and the World Affairs Councils of America, we facilitate international professional and youth exchanges through the US Department of State, as well as provide speaker programs and educational opportunities for the Kentuckiana region throughout the year. While we are a member-supported organization, we are not member exclusive in our programs, which are open to the public. As with every organization, we've had to adapt to the needs of this difficult time, but we wanted to ensure that you still had access to expert analysis and discussions on topics that impact us locally, nationally, and globally. More than ever, we are all experiencing a global crisis, even while we are isolated in our own corner of the world. Today, we're excited to welcome Dr. Renee Campbell. I'll give you a short biographical sketch of her. For more than 41 years, Dr. Campbell has practiced in the areas of education and social work. In the last 22 years of this experience, she served as the president and CEO of Wesley House Community Services, a human services organization that helps people help themselves. Presently, Dr. Campbell is the coordinator of online field and clinical assistant professor in the College of Social Work at the University of Kentucky. Outside of her full-time job, she offers individual and group virtual anti-racism group education, coaching, and international program development and implementation. Her work, interest, and passion extend beyond our borders to Africa, where in 2005, she was appointed sub-chief by the Tolon Traditional Council in the village of Tolon, Ghana. There, she created, directed, and facilitated life-changing programs for women and families. She has a passion for teaching, developing, and promoting services that positively influence opportunities for healthy families and issues of injustice all over the world.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Samantha. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here today and to represent the World Affairs Council of Louisville and Southern Indiana. What a wonderful thing to be able to talk about identity, belonging, and what's happening internationally. So when we talk about identity, we many times talk about who a person is, their distinguishing character, their qualities, what makes a person different, are qualities of different groups of people. So I'll use myself as an example. So I stand on the shoulders of those who have come before me. Mrs. Mary Campbell, Mr. Walter Campbell, Sr., my grandmother, Ada Doss Campbell, Mary Sears, Lottie Campbell, Emily Clay, Willie Jackson, and all the ancestors who were enslaved Africans that came before me. That's who I am. I'm a combination of them. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what was happening when I was born. My mother and father were married in the early 50s. My father was in the Army. He was in the 6th Armored Super 6 Division of World War II. And my mother was living up on the top of a garage outside of a house of some people that she was working for. So my father was deployed and he was in World War II. He was engaged in northern France, where they say that the people in northern France were more welcoming than any other people in France. Identity. When I was born, the infant mortality rate per 1,000 live births was 148. Imagine that, 148. Racial segregation was going on. Castration was used as a form of initiation in 11 states of the Confederacy. And I was only 4 years old when that was happening. I was born during the Civil Rights era, when just a few months earlier, Rosa Parks had refused to give up her seat on the bus. I was born at a time when 10 to 11,000 Blacks were kept from the voting rolls in 12 parishes between 1956 and 1957. Just think, I was age 1 and 2. So that was my identity then, a premature Black baby born at an Army hospital, Fort Carson Army Hospital. 4 pounds and 12 ounces is what I weighed. And my father, who was deployed and in the Army, I'm the daughter of that 2-year-old who was orphaned because his mother was put in a mental institution and died there. So one point I'd like to make is that identities change as we evolve. So I had my identity when I was born. My mother had her identity as being a wife and a mother. My grandparents had their identity as being hardworking people. But I really recognized my identity when I was a little girl living in a country town called Adairville, Kentucky, along with my 4 other siblings and my grandparents and my mother and my father. My identity there was that people always looked at me as being a mature 6-year-old. Can you imagine a mature 6-year-old? And so they would laugh and tell their jokes and recognize me because they thought that I was so mature. So that was a part of my identity. It was also a part of my belonging. My first experience with racism was when I was on a bus in Adairville, Kentucky, going to Russellville, Kentucky. I was with my mother, and we were going to Frankfort, Kentucky, where her mother lived. And so I recognized the water fountains in the bus station. And I asked my mother about going to get a drink of water. And she pointed out to me that I could not go and get a drink of water out of one faucet because I was Black. That was really the first time that I had realized that I was different and that I didn't belong to the whole group or the group that individuals said was important. So we had humble beginnings. We lived across the street from the school where Black people attended, and it was called Adairville Training School. So there was no busing during that time. So all I had to do was to go out my front door and go to that school. But that school was for Black people. I can remember that I always felt just a little different when I was little. And one experience that I had was a defining experience for me was when I was in the third grade and I raised my hand because I was so excited that I had the right answer. Well, the answer was wrong, and the teacher let me know that the answer was wrong. When she did that, all of the children laughed. And so when they did that, I was very embarrassed. I was so upset because I thought I'd gotten the right answer and I didn't get the right answer. And tears came to my eyes. So at that point, I decided that I was going to be quiet and I was not going to ever answer any more questions in class. So sometimes when unfortunate things happen to you, it really affects your sense of belonging. And that affected my sense of belonging for a very long time. So, what is a sense of belonging? Belongingness is a need to be accepted by members of a group. It can be family, it can be friends, it could be coworkers, religious groups, etc. And as human beings, we have an inherent need to want to belong. And I did not feel like that I belonged at that time when I got that wrong answer. So there are a lot of things that affect people's sense of belonging. And it can be different for different people. For me, it was getting the answer wrong in that class and then having the students laugh at me, feeling so embarrassed. And so I felt different. But sometimes the messages that we get are not just as overt. Sometimes we get subtle messages about whether we belong or not. We get verbal messages like the children that laughed at me. Um, so those things can really affect us. And so around race, some of the messages were, you can't go here, you can't go there, you can't use, this restroom, you can use that restroom, that you are different. As a girl, a little girl, a part of my identity was being quiet. But of course, that being quiet was influenced by that wrong answer that I gave in class. Another part of the identity was being shy. And I guess that was true that I was. And then the other one was being peculiar. So a family member actually said that I was a little peculiar in her opinion. So there are people that can influence how we feel about each other and our sense of belongings. Many times this happens when we're in school. It can happen when we are in different groups. There are a lot of different ways that can happen. So also, while, those students influenced me to feel like that I didn't belong, there is a story that I like to tell about Mrs. Higgins. And she was my, I think, third grade teacher, I believe. Now, when I was coming up, there was all kinds of thoughts going on about color, what I call colorism and what the color of your skin is. So having my skin color, to some people, that wasn't beautiful at all. But Mrs. Higgins was my teacher when I was a little girl, and she saw me. She thought that I was special, and she took me under her wing. She gave me messages verbally and non-verbally that influenced me to believe that I belong. So this was a white lady with long blonde hair, very slim, very friendly lady. But it was something that this lady wanted to take me under her wings, to influence me, to help me to feel like that I was important. So those type of experiences that I had also influenced me to know that I was okay. So I talked a little bit about, growing up and, how racism was there. And one point I'd like to make is that my parents and grandparents always influenced me to feel like that I belong. And they also, during those times of racism, they did not teach hate. So I think that's a good thing that I didn't grow up with parents and grandparents teaching hate because hateful things were happening to them. So my identity as a quiet person continued. And it continued because I was not necessarily comfortable in my own skin. I didn't necessarily want to take any chances or to speak out or anything, but I was able to find a space for myself. So sometimes when you don't feel like you belong, you have to create your own positive belonging for yourself. So I did that. So I went and took a class to be what I thought was a candy striper class. But because I was 14 years old, I was very mature, very responsible. The instructors really thought that I was older than what I really was. And so they had me to come to that class, and I participated along with people that were 16 and 17 years old. I prided myself on the fact that I was just as mature as they were. I took that class, I passed that class, and I became a nurse's aide when I thought that I was just going to be a candy striper. So I created my own belonging. So also, when I was doing the nurse's aide work, I discovered that I really wanted to be a social worker. And so that was at age 16. I knew what I wanted to do. And I know, many people don't even know what they want to do when they're the age that I was then. So I kept that in my mind. And even though I didn't have the social work training, I also always felt myself in a situation where I was helping and giving others advice. And that really followed me. So I went to college, still shy, but I was able to pledge. And even though I pledged, that I didn't necessarily felt that I even belonged to that sorority, because pledging is something. So anyway, that was an interesting thing for me to do. Then I went to graduate school, again, trying to continue to succeed because I still didn't have that sense of belonging. Although I did have my identity, now I was a college graduate. I did have a sense of belonging as far as being able to belong to a group of people, African-American women who had graduated from college. Went on to graduate school. And in graduate school, working on my master's degree was the time that my professors saw me, two professors, And they really thought that I had something to offer. They thought that I had something special. So my identity was a college graduate, um, someone that wanted to go to graduate school to get a master's degree. And that was my part of my identity. So the professors in the graduate school saw that I was very quiet, that I didn't say much. And one of the things they did while I was in my field practicum is that they did an exercise called Gestalt exercise. And they were able to help me remember what had happened in the third grade, and that those children had laughed at me when I got the wrong answer. And so the question they asked me is, Renee, how long are you going to let those third graders control you? And a light went off, and I said, not any longer. So that was a breakthrough. That was a breakthrough for me. And so here it was. Now I had a voice, which really helped my sense of belonging, which really helped my identity, because I started to be a person that spoke out and had an opinion. And so that was okay. So that helped my sense of belonging. It also helped my sense of identity. And so when I became more professional and more educated, I was able to get out into the workplace. And there are a lot of things that happen when you get out into the workplace, and you do discover how you behave as a professional and how you behave within your own skin as a professional, how you behave around your friends, how you behave around your colleagues. And so I carried myself as a professional. One thing I had to do is to navigate myself in a racist society, and to recognize that I would not be given the same experiences or opportunities as others because of the color of my skin. And so one of the things that I was doing, and I was doing this before I even knew that there was a word for it, and is living and having a double consciousness experience. And if you don't know, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, in his book called The Souls of Black Folks, talks about having a double consciousness experience. So this is an individual whose identity is divided into several facets. And I quote him: "It's a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of the world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One ever feels his two-ness as an American, a Negro, two souls." So like I said, I was living this double consciousness before I even had a concrete definition of what that is. And so I found myself assimilating to succeed. And when I talk about assimilating to succeed, for me as an African American woman, there's a lot of ways you assimilate. And I think that many of us didn't necessarily realize that we were assimilating. For instance, when I was in my teens, I got a perm. I didn't get a perm to make my hair curly. I got a perm to make my hair straight and to make the edges straight. Why would one do that? Well, because it was not accepted for you to have an afro or for you to have braids. And so in order to get a job then many of us, and myself, I'll speak for myself as an African American woman, changed my hair to get a job, to make sure that I was not seen in a certain way by the powers that be. And then you have grammar, which everybody should learn should speak the correct grammar. You can't go to a job and speak bad grammar. You can't do it and expect to get a job. Dress, another way to assimilate. So, dashikis and African attire and things like that, that hadn't always been accepted at all. So you have your, professional life, and then you have your private life. So that's another way to assimilate. As far as professional life is concerned, college, education has always been important in my family. And so I come from a working class family. My father was in the Army. He took shoe repair in the Army. He also worked any type of construction job he could get. My mother, she took secretarial science and got a certificate in secretarial science. But because of where they were, as far as, in time, they were not able to get jobs because of racism. And so education was very important to my grandparents and also to my parents, and they passed it down from generation to generation. It was important to go to college. It was important to get a master's degree. They didn't say that I had to get a doctorate degree. That was fueled by what I wanted to do and the goal that I had for myself. Not that, it does change you as far as, how people identify you. I'm still don't know if it really helps or not sometimes, because we have continued, racism, stereotyping, etc., that often keep individuals like me from being able to exceed or as much as others do. Because I learned a lot about what's going on in the world, what's going on with women, what's going on with Black women, what's going on with Black people, I have been often inspired, which also increased how I identify, because I'm a person that likes to help people, and I'm also a person that sees things that need to be done. And if I can do those things, then I begin. Sometimes I don't necessarily know how it's going to happen, but I make sure that it does. So a part of my identity has been helping women. So back in the early 1999, I was able to sit in the living room with 3 or 4 friends of mine and to start a program called the Louisville Clothesline Project, which is a project that brings attention to widespread abuse of women by having women get together and decorate color-coded shirts that let people see the abuse that they've experienced. And that project stayed around for over 20 years. So, here it was, I saw, these women are getting abused physically, mentally, sexually, financially, by authority, homophobic violence. And here it is, I could help women to have a voice. And so that's what I did. So that became a part of my identity. Um, and I belong to this group of strong and powerful women who wanted to eradicate abuse. Then the other thing I did was to travel to Ghana, West Africa. And so I traveled to Ghana back in 2005 as a part of the Sister Cities program, which has sister cities relationships with different countries in the world. And my interest happened to be Ghana. And one of the reasons that I was so interested in Ghana is for ancestral reasons. So as you know, many enslaved Africans cannot trace their lineage. So it was wonderful for me to be able to go because many of the enslaved Africans came from West Africa. So I had the opportunity to travel to Ghana. And it was amazing. It's not even the biggest word that I could use for that. But I saw people that looked like me. Because I'm a social worker, there are things that I could do to help. And one of the first questions I ask is, what can I do to help? And so they told me. I was able to come back to Louisville and to raise some money for a internet program and send that money back. And then by that time, they had decided that they wanted to make me a development chief in the village of Tolon, Ghana, West Africa, which is one of the poorest villages with the highest number of street children. I have to tell you, I was made a chief then, and I liken that experience to second to the birth of my children. And so my assignment was to help the people in the village. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So one thing about Africa, and that a very close young woman told me when I was explaining her experience, she said, Mom, she calls me Mom, M-U-M, she said, and suddenly you were visible. So what does that mean? And suddenly you were visible in Africa. Well, it means that I was seen. I was seen. I was not just in a environment where, I was not seen by the powers that be. I was seen. I saw myself on money. I saw myself on billboards. I saw myself as the majority in shops and stores and beauty shops and schools and things like that. That is a sense of belonging. That is a sense of identity. It's amazing when you are submerged and how you feel when you're in a place that embraces and supports you and you're not seen as the other. I've been able to do many things as a sub-chief in Ghana, West Africa, in the village of Tolon. I've been able to raise money for computers, bicycles, uniforms. Recently, in 2019, I was able to start the first educational empowerment program for students in kindergarten through the 8th grade. And so that was very exciting. So that scholarship program is providing 22 scholarships for these children that are in the villages of Tolon, Ghana. who would not be able to go to school if that program didn't start. I've already funded the second year of that program, and now I'm working on the third year of that program. So when I started the program, I didn't necessarily know how I was going to fund it, but I just knew that I was going to. So now we have the Maltana of Tolon Educational Empowerment Program. My plans were to go this past August and to visit the families of those recipients of the scholarships. But because of the virus, I was not able to go. But I'm still in contact with them. I have pictures of them receiving their scholarships. Parents are happy. I just was able to provide a mask up initiative for children and parents that are in the village of Tolon. So the work really continues, and it's something that I am going to continue for the rest of my life. So in closing, as far as identity, belonging, and a sense of purpose, one thing I'd like to leave with you is that poverty does not mean failure. That it's very important to recognize the importance of spirituality. Also important to utilize support systems. Learn from the elders. Elders, people my age, people that are older than you, many times have something to offer you. Create and maintain a positive self-talk. We have to make sure that we say nice and positive things. Also, to embrace and document successes and to leave the comfort zone. So I'd like to leave you with this, and this is from a person, Dr. Joseph McMillan, who was the professor emeritus at the University of Louisville, and he asserted that significant others have an influence on individual success and are almost as important as the individual's perception of self. If a person thinks and believes strongly that one can accomplish a goal, and that one's significant others believe that person can accomplish a goal, and that individual internalizes the significant other's belief, along with the individual's belief that it can be accomplished, then the individual can and will accomplish the goal and succeed. Thank you again, and I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to present to you today.